Europe's cities have always been shaped by movement, people arriving, settling, building, and rebuilding. But in 2025, that movement feels faster and more visible than ever. Streets echo with dozens of languages. Skylines change almost monthly. And while diversity has brought new life to many places, it's also created challenges that city planners, locals, and newcomers are struggling to balance. From housing shortages to cultural tensions and infrastructure under strain, these are the 10 European cities that have changed forever because of mass immigration. This isn't about blame or politics, it's about reality. The numbers are undeniable. Millions have moved across Europe in the past decade, and cities once known for quiet order now pulse with new energy, opportunity, and friction. Whether you see it as transformation or turmoil depends on where you stand. So buckle up. We're diving into the places where change is impossible to ignore, where new faces have reshaped old streets, and where every corner tells a story about what happens when migration meets modern Europe. Let's begin. 10. Stockholm, Sweden. Once known as one of Europe's most peaceful and orderly capitals, Stockholm has experienced some of the continent's fastest demographic changes over the past 15 years. What used to be a city defined by calm streets, pastel-colored waterfronts, and minimal crime is now a mosaic of contrasts, neighborhoods thriving with cultural energy, and others wrestling with integration, rising costs, and uneven opportunity. Between 2010 and 2025, Sweden's foreign-born population has grown by more than 40%, and Stockholm became the epicenter of that shift. Suburbs like Rinkeby, Tensta, and Skärholmen, once quiet, working-class districts, are now home to large migrant communities from the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. Walk through them today, and you'll see grocery stores with Arabic and Somali signage, international cafes, and community centers teaching both Swedish and English side by side. The city's new identity is unmistakable, diverse, vibrant, but also divided. On paper, Sweden's integration model remains one of the most generous in Europe: language classes, social welfare, and housing support. But in practice, Stockholm's rapid growth outpaced its infrastructure. The housing crisis here is severe. Waiting lists for affordable apartments stretch years, and rising property costs have pushed both locals and newcomers into outer suburbs. Those suburbs have, in turn, struggled with unemployment rates nearly triple the city's average, leaving entire districts trapped between hope and stagnation. Security has become a lightning rod issue. While the vast majority of migrants live peaceful lives, police data shows certain outer city areas recording higher than average incidents of gang violence and youth unemployment. Political debates over crime and integration dominate Swedish headlines almost weekly. In response, the government has increased funding for community policing and job programs, but residents say progress feels uneven. Yet to paint Stockholm as broken would miss the bigger picture. The city has also seen entrepreneurial booms driven by its new residents. Restaurants serving Levantine street food, African fusion cafes, and Middle Eastern textile shops now dot the once homogeneous downtown streets. Cultural festivals draw massive crowds every summer, and second-generation entrepreneurs are redefining what it means to be Swedish. The transformation is complex, part success story, part warning signal. Economically, the shift is visible too. The city's service sector and logistics industries rely heavily on migrant labor, while high-skilled newcomers fill gaps in IT, healthcare, and construction. This dependence means that while some Swedes lament the pace of change, the capital simply couldn't function without the workers who arrived over the past decade. So, has mass immigration destroyed Stockholm's identity, or evolved it? The answer depends on perspective. Talk to an older resident of Gamla Stan, and they'll tell you, the city doesn't feel Swedish anymore. Talk to a young designer in Södermalm, and they'll say, this is what modern Europe looks like. Either way, Stockholm's transformation is irreversible. The city that once stood as a symbol of Scandinavian simplicity now stands as a living experiment, one of Europe's first truly global cities in culture, economy, and challenge. And that's why Stockholm begins our countdown at number 10. 9. Paris, France. If there's one European city where the debate over immigration, identity, and change feels woven into the very cobblestones, it's Paris. Long romanticized as the city of light, Paris has, in the past decade, become something more complicated, a city that glitters and grinds at the same time. By 2025, nearly 1 in 5 Parisians is foreign-born, and when you include second-generation residents, that number climbs even higher. This isn't new. Paris has been a magnet for migration since the 1960s. But what's different now is the intensity and visibility of the transformation, and how sharply it divides opinion. Walk through central Paris, and it's easy to believe nothing's changed. Tourists sipping espresso beneath the Eiffel Tower, luxury boutiques glowing on Avenue Montaigne, and artists painting along the Seine. But ride line 13 north toward Saint-Denis or south toward Ivry-sur-Seine, and you'll find a different rhythm entirely. Markets overflow with African spices and Middle Eastern textiles. Entire neighborhoods pulse with North African music, Haitian patois, and Arabic conversation. Paris today feels like a dozen countries packed into one metro network, a city in constant negotiation with itself. Much of this change stems from France's long-standing colonial links and post-war labor policies. Migrants were invited to rebuild the country's infrastructure, and later generations stayed, raised families, and built communities. Yet housing policy never kept pace. As rents soared in the historic core, low-income families, both French-born and immigrant, were pushed outward into the banlieues, the vast suburban belt surrounding Paris. Those suburbs, designed in the 1960s for modern living, now hold some of the densest populations in Europe. Their high-rises tell two stories at once: resilience and neglect. In 2025, the challenge isn't simply numbers, it's the gap between opportunity and access. Youth unemployment in some outer districts remains stubbornly high, sometimes double the national average. Public schools in these areas often struggle with funding, teacher shortages, and overcrowding. The government has launched multiple urban renewal initiatives, pouring billions into renovation projects and job programs. Still, progress feels uneven. Many Parisians describe the city as a tale of two realities: polished, postcard Paris versus peripheral Paris, the France most tourists never see. Cultural life, however, tells another story. The new Paris is alive in its music, cuisine, and art. Hip-hop, Afrobeat, and North African fusion now dominate the charts. Immigrant chefs have redefined French dining. Couscous is now one of the country's most popular dishes. Fashion houses incorporate designs inspired by West Africa and the Middle East. The creative energy radiating from these communities has made Paris arguably more global and more influential than ever. But that same energy comes with tension. Every election cycle, debates over identity, secularism, and belonging resurface. The question of what it means to be French, once philosophical, now shapes real policies on citizenship, religion in schools, and urban policing. The 2024 protests in Paris's northern suburbs highlighted the deep frustration among young people who feel both fully French and perpetually seen as outsiders. These moments of unrest aren't just social flare-ups, they're signs of a country wrestling with its 21st century identity. For the everyday Parisian, though, life continues in contradictions. You might have an Algerian baker next to a Vietnamese cafe, across from a Senegalese barber, all serving lifelong Parisians who don't think twice about it. The mosaic works, mostly. The pressure points come when housing scarcity, inequality, and discrimination collide. That's the modern Paris paradox: diversity that fuels creativity, and inequality that threatens cohesion. Yet despite its struggles, Paris remains one of the most magnetic cities on Earth. Its immigrant communities are not just participants but architects of its modern identity. Without them, the city's restaurants, hospitals, construction sites, and metro systems would simply not function. Paris is a case study in how immigration reshapes a city from the ground up, its sounds, smells, skyline, and politics. So yes, Paris has changed forever. Whether you see that as loss or renewal depends on which cafe window you're looking through. The city that once exported culture to the world now absorbs it from every direction, and somehow, it still feels like Paris. That complexity, the beauty and the strain existing side by side, is why the French capital sits at number 9 on our countdown. 8. Berlin, Germany. Few European cities embody transformation as vividly as Berlin. Once divided by concrete and ideology, now it stands divided by economics and identity, not in hostility, but in complexity. For decades, Berlin symbolized freedom, art, and reinvention. But in 2025, it has also become one of Europe's most fascinating case studies in how mass migration reshapes a city's soul. Following Germany's open border policies during the 2015-2016 migrant crisis, Berlin became one of the first destinations for hundreds of thousands seeking safety, work, or a new start. Today, more than 30% of Berlin's residents have an immigrant background, and in some districts, that number rises to nearly half. Walk through Kreuzberg, Neukölln, or Wedding, and you can trace entire migration histories in a few blocks. Turkish bakeries beside Lebanese shawarma shops, African barbers next to Syrian grocery stores, and hip German startups hiring English-speaking developers from every continent. It's chaotic, creative, and, to some locals, confusing. Berlin's transformation is not subtle. A city once dominated by grey post-war architecture and techno-clubs has turned into a living mural of languages and lifestyles. Yet beneath the vibrant street art and international restaurants lies a story of economic strain and urban identity under pressure. Housing is the flashpoint. Berlin's population boom has driven rents to record highs, turning what was once Europe's most affordable capital into a city where even locals struggled to stay. In 2010, Berliners could rent a one-bedroom apartment for €500. By 2025, that price often exceeds €1,400, if you can find one at all. This surge has fueled frustration and resentment, not necessarily against newcomers, but against the policies that failed to anticipate rapid population growth. Berlin isn't angry at immigrants, one longtime resident told a German news outlet. It's angry at landlords and politicians. Still, integration remains uneven. Many refugees who arrived in the mid-2010s are now German citizens or permanent residents, fluent in the language and employed in sectors like construction, tech, and healthcare. But others remain stuck in low-income cycles, facing language barriers and underemployment. The city has poured millions into job training programs and cultural centers, but progress varies sharply from district to district. Neukölln, once labeled a problem neighborhood, has become a symbol of both success and struggle, a place where diversity fuels innovation but also highlights inequality. Culturally, Berlin's immigrant influence has become inseparable from its global image. Turkish and Middle Eastern food culture defines local cuisine. Arabic and English mix freely in public conversations. Artists from Syria, Iran, and Nigeria fill galleries once dominated by post-war German minimalism. Music, too, tells the story. Hip-hop and Afrobeat echo through spaces that used to pulse only with techno. Berlin's multicultural rhythm isn't an accessory, it's the main soundtrack now. Politically, immigration remains a hot-button issue. Debates over housing, policing, and asylum policy spill into national discourse, but Berlin itself has earned a reputation for tolerance, even defiance. Demonstrations supporting refugee rights are common, often drawing crowds of tens of thousands. At the same time, far-right parties have gained small footholds in outer districts, channeling frustration from those who feel left behind by the city's transformation. Crime statistics add nuance, not sensationalism. While isolated headlines about gang activity or cultural clashes surface, most data show that Berlin's crime rate overall has declined over the past 5 years. What has risen is the sense of insecurity, fed by economic anxiety, not just migration. Sociologists note that when cities change faster than people can process, fear becomes psychological before it becomes statistical. Berlin is living proof of that dynamic. Economically, the immigrant population is not just surviving, it's fueling the city's growth. Thousands of new small businesses, from cafes to logistics firms, are immigrant-owned. Many migrants fill essential jobs in construction, delivery, healthcare, and retail, sectors that keep Berlin running. In the tech world, international talent is a lifeline. English-speaking developers and engineers are the backbone of the startup boom that earned Berlin its nickname, Silicon Alley. But for all its diversity and dynamism, Berlin is also tired. Locals talk about the old Berlin, the quiet, artsy, cheap city of the 1990s, as if it were a vanished friend. Newcomers talk about opportunity. Older residents talk about exhaustion. The truth sits somewhere in between, a city stretched thin but still full of possibility. Berlin is not collapsing. It's transforming faster than any European capital can comfortably manage. In 2025, when people say, Berlin isn't German anymore, they often mean it as both compliment and complaint. It's not German in the traditional sense, it's global, restless, experimental, and at times chaotic. But it's also a reflection of what modern Europe is becoming, a continent of mixed identities and shared challenges. Berlin just got there first. And that's why Germany's capital lands at number 8. Not because it lost its identity, but because it rebuilt it entirely. 7. London, United Kingdom. If there's a single city that defines the complexity of modern immigration in Europe, it's London. A place where centuries of migration have shaped everything from food to finance, yet where the question of identity has never felt more charged. In 2025, London stands as both a triumph and a test. Proof that diversity can build a world capital, and a reminder that even the strongest cities have limits when growth outpaces balance. London has always been international. From post-war Caribbean arrivals to South Asian and Eastern European communities, migration is in its DNA. But over the past 2 decades, the scale has accelerated dramatically. Nearly 39% of London's population was born outside the UK, one of the highest ratios of any major city on Earth. Step off the tube at any station, and the world greets you. Polish delis beside Nigerian markets, Turkish kebab shops next to Pakistani tailors, and investment firms run by Europeans, Africans, and Middle Easterners side by side. To outsiders, that sounds like a utopia of multiculturalism, and in many ways, it is. London's cultural ecosystem thrives on this energy. The food, the art, the music, all global, all fused. But the other side of that brilliance is pressure, on housing, healthcare, jobs, and local identity. In 2025, London's transformation isn't just visible, it's tangible in the cost of living and the sound of public debate. Housing is the loudest crisis. A one-bedroom flat now averages over £2,000 per month, and even middle-income earners struggle to stay within the city. Entire boroughs once considered affordable, like Newham, Haringey, or Croydon, have seen rents soar as population growth outpaces supply. In some districts, landlords now divide family homes into micro-apartments, creating overcrowded living conditions. These pressures don't fall on immigrants alone, they affect everyone. But because new arrivals often enter at the bottom rung of the housing market, they feel it first and hardest. Employment is another paradox. London's economy runs on immigrant labor. Without migrant doctors, construction workers, delivery riders, and hospitality staff, the city would literally stop functioning. Yet some sectors show rising underemployment, highly qualified newcomers working below their skill level. Language, credential recognition, and bureaucracy form invisible barriers that keep many from reaching their potential. Socially, London remains one of the most tolerant cities in Europe, but even here, integration is uneven. Some boroughs celebrate multicultural harmony. Others show quiet segregation, with communities existing side by side but rarely mixing deeply. Local councils have invested in community centers and intercultural festivals, but urban sociologists note that rising rents and economic polarization push people into self-contained social bubbles. London isn't a melting pot, one researcher observed recently. It's a patchwork, and some patches are wearing thin. Politics has reflected that tension. Debates over migration levels, post-Brexit labor shortages, and border enforcement shape national elections, but their frontline effects are felt in London's streets. The 2024 protests around asylum housing and cost of living pressures drew attention to just how stretched local services have become. Health clinics, schools, and public transport are all under strain. Londoners, native-born and newcomers alike, are asking the same question. How much change can one city absorb before it breaks its rhythm? Still, for every headline about crisis, there's a counter-story of success. Immigrant-owned businesses now make up over half of all new startups in the capital. They've revived once declining high streets, from Southall to Peckham, transforming empty storefronts into bustling hubs of trade and culture. Second-generation Londoners, born to immigrant parents, now dominate creative industries, tech startups, and city politics. They call themselves Londoners First, proof that identity here evolves, rather than erases. Culturally, London is more global than ever. The Notting Hill Carnival, Diwali in Trafalgar Square, and Eid celebrations in parks across the city draw millions every year. British music, fashion, and cinema all pulse with influences from Africa, the Caribbean, South Asia, and Eastern Europe. The modern, British sound, from grime to Afro-swing, is a product of migration's creative fusion. But not everyone sees the transformation through the same lens. For some, London's rapid change feels like a disconnection from what once made it uniquely British, its neighborhoods, accents, and traditions. For others, that change is its superpower, making it the only truly global city in Europe post-Brexit. In truth, both are right. London has lost some of its old identity, but in exchange, it's gained a new one. A city where no single culture dominates, yet all coexist in a constantly shifting mosaic. That's the paradox of London in 2025, both the success story and the warning sign. It's proof that immigration can build a global capital, but also that even world cities need breathing room, planning, and infrastructure to keep that success sustainable. London hasn't collapsed, but it is learning, painfully, that diversity alone doesn't guarantee harmony. It requires investment, empathy, and time. And that's why London lands at number 7 on our list, a city forever defined by change, trying to hold its center while the world keeps moving in. 6. Rome, Italy. Few cities carry the weight of history quite like Rome. It's the cradle of Western civilization, the heart of the Catholic world, and a living museum of stone and spirit. Yet even here, among ancient ruins and timeless piazzas, the forces of modern migration have left an unmistakable imprint. In 2025, Rome stands as a paradox, ancient yet restless, proud yet pressured, and forever negotiating the balance between tradition and transformation. Italy has long been a gateway to Europe. Geography alone makes it inevitable: thousands of miles of coastline, proximity to North Africa, and a location that places it directly on the path of human movement from east to west. Over the past decade, waves of migrants and refugees from Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe have arrived through Italy's southern ports. Many moved north, but many stayed. And Rome, as the nation's heart, absorbed the rhythm of this influx. Today, nearly 1 in 10 Roman residents was born outside Italy. The city's streets tell the story vividly. In Esquilino, just behind Termini Station, Chinese grocery stores, Bangladeshi phone shops, and North African barbers line streets that once held small Italian bakeries and antique shops. The district is often called the new face of Rome, a phrase meant with both admiration and anxiety. Walk a few blocks further and you'll hear 5 languages before you reach the corner. This change has brought both renewal and strain. On one hand, immigration has filled vital labor gaps. Foreign workers power construction sites, logistics depots, domestic services, and the restaurant industry. Without them, Rome's day-to-day economy, from cafes to cleaning services, would grind to a halt. Many of the city's elderly population now rely on caregivers from Eastern Europe and the Philippines. For countless families, these migrants aren't just employees, they're lifelines. But Rome's infrastructure wasn't built for fast population growth. Affordable housing is scarce, and bureaucracy is notoriously slow. Squats and informal settlements have multiplied in abandoned buildings on the city's edges. The government has alternated between crackdowns and amnesty programs, but neither has solved the core issue: too many people chasing too few opportunities. Many newcomers live in limbo, legally present but economically invisible. That invisibility breeds tension, not because of who they are, but because the system isn't flexible enough to integrate them quickly. Culturally, the shift is unmistakable. Traditional Italian markets now sell African spices, Middle Eastern flatbreads, and South Asian ingredients. Cafes serve cappuccino alongside Arabic coffee. Festivals celebrating migrant communities draw thousands to public squares every summer. Rome's diversity has enriched its cultural life, but it's also exposed a deeper divide between the city's affluent north and its working-class south. Social integration remains a challenge. While younger Italians are largely comfortable in multicultural settings, older generations sometimes view the transformation with unease. Populist parties have capitalized on those fears, framing immigration as a symbol of government failure rather than social evolution. Yet even those same critics often admit that Rome's services and industries could not function without migrant labor. The contradiction defines modern Italy: dependence mixed with distrust. Law enforcement and policymakers face constant balancing acts. Crackdowns on illegal labor and street vending happen regularly, but they rarely address root causes. Informal economies flourish because they're the only accessible path for many who can't navigate Italy's complex paperwork. Community organizations and the Catholic Church often step in where the state falls short, providing shelter, language classes, and legal aid. The Vatican itself, just across the river, remains one of the largest humanitarian supporters of migrants in the region. There are also quieter stories of success. The children of immigrants, born in Italy but not always granted automatic citizenship, are reshaping what it means to be Roman. They speak perfect Italian, follow local football teams, and see themselves as part of the city's future. These second-generation youth are filling classrooms, universities, and workplaces, slowly blending cultures into something uniquely Italian yet undeniably global. Still, tension simmers beneath the surface. Occasional protests erupt over housing, wages, or legal recognition. Public frustration, aimed as much at bureaucracy as at migration, keeps the issue in the headlines. In 2024, a major demonstration in central Rome called for equal rights and real inclusion, echoing through the same streets that once hosted emperors and popes. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Rome has seen empires rise and fall. It's seeing a new kind of transformation now. Economically, immigration has added complexity to an already fragile system. Italy's aging population means that without new workers, tax revenues would collapse. Immigrants keep that demographic crisis at bay, yet many remain excluded from long-term stability. For policymakers, the equation is simple but unsolved: how to integrate faster without losing social cohesion. Rome in 2025 isn't collapsing under immigration, it's adapting. Sometimes beautifully, sometimes painfully. The eternal city has always absorbed change, it simply takes its time. From the outside, visitors still see the Colosseum and Vatican. But beneath the postcard skyline lies a city quietly redefining itself, not as purely Italian, but as Mediterranean, multicultural, and unmistakably 21st century. That's why Rome sits at number 6 on our countdown. It's a reminder that even the most ancient cities can't escape modern migrations, and sometimes, survival means transformation. 5. Athens, Greece. Athens has always been a city at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. For thousands of years, people have arrived here from across the Mediterranean, bringing ideas, trade, and change. In 2025, that story continues, but the pace and the pressure are new. The Greek capital has become one of Europe's busiest entry points for migrants and asylum seekers from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. The result is a city that feels both reborn and burdened at once. Ancient marble standing beside temporary shelters, mythic history intersecting with very modern realities. In the years after the 2015 refugee crisis, Greece found itself carrying a disproportionate share of Europe's migration wave. Many people passed through on their way north, but thousands stayed. By 2025, Athens' immigrant and refugee population is estimated at well over 15%. The neighborhoods around Ammonia, Victoria Square, and Kypseli are now deeply international. Signs in Arabic, Farsi, and French mix with Greek storefronts. The aroma of souvlaki blends with Syrian shawarma and Ethiopian coffee. For many locals, that diversity has become part of Athens' new rhythm. Artists and entrepreneurs from migrant communities have opened cafes, cultural centers, and social collectives, reviving buildings left vacant after the financial crisis. Some call it the Second Renaissance, a rebirth driven by people who arrived with little but turned survival into creativity. The once declining district of Kypseli is now a vibrant hub of small businesses, music, and art, fueled by both young Athenians and newcomers. Yet the transformation isn't seamless. The economic scars of Greece's decade-long recession haven't fully healed. Unemployment remains high, particularly among youth, and wages often lag behind living costs. When newcomers arrive seeking work, competition intensifies. It's not hostility that fuels frustration, it's scarcity. Locals struggling to find stability feel squeezed. Migrants searching for safety feel stuck. The tension isn't cultural as much as it is economic. Housing is a major flashpoint. Rents in central Athens have surged as investors buy up properties for short-term rentals. Migrant families crowd into small apartments, sometimes shared by multiple households. Informal housing arrangements are common, and that instability spills into everything else: school enrollment, healthcare access, and social services. Local NGOs and volunteer groups do much of the work the state cannot, providing legal aid and emergency shelter. The government's efforts at formal integration programs are improving but stretched thin. Despite these challenges, Athens also tells a quieter story of coexistence. Greek society has deep traditions of hospitality, philoxenia, the love of strangers, and it shows. Neighborhoods like Exarchia and Metaxourgio host cooperative kitchens, language exchanges, and cultural events that bring locals and migrants together. In recent years, small-scale social enterprises run by refugees have gained national attention. Bakeries employing women from Syria and Afghanistan, repair workshops run by African craftsmen, and design studios blending Greek and Middle Eastern art. Still, there's no denying the strain. Public opinion polls show Greeks torn between compassion and fatigue. Many support humanitarian aid but worry about long-term integration. Politicians walk a delicate line, reassuring European partners while addressing domestic concerns. Border enforcement remains strict in the Aegean Islands, but Athens itself has become the country's testing ground for coexistence. Security concerns occasionally flare, not because of widespread crime, but because of perception. Isolated incidents get amplified in media, creating fear that doesn't always match reality. Police presence in migrant-heavy areas has increased, sometimes causing friction. Activists argue that heavy-handed tactics risk alienating communities that already feel marginalized. The truth lies in between. Athens is neither chaotic nor perfectly harmonious. It's improvising, like it always has. Culturally, the city is transforming in fascinating ways. Immigrant chefs are reimagining Greek dishes. African drumming echoes in public squares. Young Athenians collaborate with refugee artists on murals that turn gray walls into stories of journey and hope. The old and new coexist. The Parthenon still glows at sunset, but beneath it, an entire generation of Athenians is redefining what Greek means in a global century. For Greece, the demographic reality is clear. Its population is aging and shrinking. Without immigration, economic recovery would be far slower. Migrants are keeping the labor force alive, filling roles in agriculture, logistics, and construction. In the long term, this movement isn't a crisis, it's an evolution. The challenge is managing it with dignity and planning, something Greece continues to learn the hard way. In 2025, Athens feels like a city in transition, worn but resilient. Its people debate fiercely but still share food, stories, and space. For every clash, there's also compassion. For every moment of tension, there's another of quiet solidarity. The city that once gave the world democracy is still teaching Europe what it means to adapt without losing soul. That's why Athens lands at number 5 on our list, not as a symbol of failure, but as proof that even amid hardship, humanity endures. Athens isn't collapsing under migration, it's reshaping itself, painfully, beautifully, and irreversibly. For Madrid, Spain. Madrid has always been a city of motion, of arrivals, departures, and reinvention. It's the heart of Spain, but in 2025, it's also one of Europe's most vivid examples of what happens when migration transforms not just neighborhoods, but national identity itself. Once defined by tapas bars, royal architecture, and a leisurely pace of life, Madrid has evolved into a restless, multicultural capital where Spanish, Arabic, Romanian, and Latin American Spanish mingle in the same plaza. For decades, Spain was a country of emigrants, its citizens leaving for Germany, Britain, or Latin America in search of opportunity. But the story reversed in the 1990s and accelerated after 2010. By 2025, foreign-born residents make up roughly 25% of Madrid's population, a dramatic shift that reshaped the city's housing market, labor force, and cultural heartbeat. Walk through the Lavapiés district and you'll feel that transformation instantly. Once a working-class Spanish neighborhood, it's now a living map of global migration. Senegalese street vendors sell handmade jewelry beside Bangladeshi mini-markets and Latin American eateries. The scent of curry mingles with churros. It's chaotic, loud, and alive. Lavapiés has become a symbol of modern Madrid, not purely Spanish anymore, but unmistakably Madrileño. Immigration has fueled Madrid's economy. Migrants fill key roles in logistics, hospitality, construction, and domestic work, jobs many locals no longer pursue. Spanish economists often call migrants the invisible backbone of urban growth. Without them, the city's rhythm, buses running, cafes buzzing, hotels cleaning, children cared for, would falter. Yet that very dependence creates paradoxes. Rising demand for labor without sufficient housing, multicultural success without full inclusion. Housing costs are Madrid's biggest pressure point. The city's population growth, paired with foreign investment and tourism-driven rentals, has pushed rent prices up by over 40% in 5 years. For middle and working-class families, Spanish or immigrant, affordable housing is slipping away. In some neighborhoods, long-time residents have been priced out, replaced by wealthier newcomers or short-term renters. That gentrification has sparked protests and policy debates. Critics argue that while migration brings economic vitality, poor urban planning turns it into competition rather than coexistence. Still, Madrid's multicultural identity isn't a problem to solve, it's a reality to embrace. The city has absorbed massive demographic change more peacefully than many European capitals. Part of the reason lies in Spain's social fabric, family-centered culture, Catholic traditions of charity, and a national memory of emigration. Most Spaniards still remember when their grandparents were the ones seeking opportunity abroad. That empathy tempers conflict, even when frustrations rise. Education is one of Madrid's quiet success stories. Public schools have adapted impressively to diversity, offering bilingual support and integration programs. Children from Morocco, Venezuela, Pakistan, and Romania sit side by side in classrooms, and within a generation, they'll call themselves Spaniards. Teachers describe it as a new Spain growing in real time. Those kids will soon define what Spanish means, not replacing old culture, but expanding it. Religion, too, is evolving. Madrid's skyline now includes not only cathedrals but also mosques, evangelical chapels, and Hindu temples. The city's interfaith councils organize events celebrating shared values, while occasional tensions, often stoked by politics more than reality, remain isolated. Most residents navigate difference with quiet pragmatism. You respect my culture, I respect yours. Culturally, immigration has enriched Madrid beyond measure. Latin American migrants have reinvigorated Spanish-language music scenes, blending reggaeton, flamenco, and Afro-Caribbean rhythms into something uniquely urban and new. Restaurants once known for traditional tapas now serve fusion dishes, Colombian arepas beside Spanish tortilla. Street art across the city celebrates unity in diversity. Murals in Carabanchel and Usera depict hands of different colors holding the Spanish flag together. Politically, Madrid's transformation has reshaped the national conversation. Immigration is no longer a fringe topic, it's central. The debate now revolves around infrastructure, labor rights, and inclusion. Right-wing parties warn of cultural erosion, while centrists and progressives emphasize economic necessity and moral duty. But on the streets, outside campaign slogans, life is more nuanced. Spaniards and migrants live, work, and argue together, not perfectly, but peacefully. Crime and safety statistics tell a story often ignored by sensational headlines. Despite the city's population boom, overall crime rates have declined slightly since 2020. The challenge is perception, not data. Social media amplifies isolated incidents into fear narratives, but official reports show that integration, while uneven, is largely working. Madrid's government faces two big tests: housing and wages. The labor market relies on migrants, but pay gaps persist. Many foreign workers earn less than locals in similar roles, especially in service industries. Activist groups are pushing for fair wage reforms and faster citizenship paths for long-term residents. The City Council has launched pilot projects offering language classes, small business grants, and community centers to strengthen inclusion, efforts praised across Europe. But even progress has its shadows. Gentrification and rapid modernization are erasing pieces of the old Madrid that older residents remember, the tight-knit neighborhoods where everyone knew each other. They see their streets changing languages, their rents rising, their children moving out. Nostalgia mixes with uncertainty. Yet younger generations view the same streets and see opportunity, energy, and belonging. That's the generational divide defining Madrid's story today. In the end, Madrid's transformation is neither crisis nor miracle, it's momentum. The city that once sent its people across oceans now draws the world to its doorstep. And despite its struggles, Madrid remains what it has always been: a city that adapts, absorbs, and endures. That's why Madrid lands at number 4 on our countdown, not because it's falling apart, but because it's rewriting what it means to be Spanish in the 21st century. 3. Paris, France. No European city sparks as much fascination, or as much debate, as Paris. To some, it's the world's capital of art, culture, and romance. To others, in 2025, it's a city wrestling with identity, division, and transformation on an unprecedented scale. Immigration has not merely changed Paris, it has redefined it. Every arrondissement, from the grand boulevards near the Seine to the tight alleys of Saint-Denis, carries the marks of movement, adaptation, and tension. For generations, France has drawn workers, artists, and dreamers from across its former colonies. Algerians, Moroccans, Tunisians, Senegalese, Vietnamese, and many more arrived to rebuild the nation after World War II. Their children and grandchildren became French, but never stopped hearing questions about belonging. Then came the 21st century's new wave: refugees from Syria and Afghanistan, economic migrants from Eastern Europe and Sub-Saharan Africa, and young professionals from around the world chasing opportunity. By 2025, more than 1 in 5 residents of the Paris metropolitan area were born outside France. Entire suburbs have become international in every sense. Walk through Saint-Denis, Montreuil, or Aubervilliers, and you'll hear Arabic, Wolof, Creole, and Portuguese as often as French. The metro hums with dozens of languages. Bakeries sell baguettes beside kebabs and samosas. Friday markets overflow with spices, fabrics, and voices that echo far beyond Europe. Paris's diversity is visible and powerful, but it also tests the limits of its infrastructure. The cost of living has soared. Rents in central districts have driven middle-class families outward, and those outer suburbs, once neglected, now hold the city's most intense growth. Schools are overcrowded, healthcare centers overstretched, and public transport packed beyond design. The result is not chaos, but a constant hum of strain, an urban system working at its absolute limits. Employment tells a similar story. Immigrants fill essential roles in transport, food delivery, cleaning, construction, and healthcare, jobs that keep Paris functioning every single day. Yet barriers remain: lower wages, limited upward mobility, and bureaucratic obstacles to recognition of foreign qualifications. The paradox is painful but clear: the same people who sustain the city often feel excluded from its rewards. Socially, Paris walks a narrow line between inclusion and alienation. Younger generations, born in France to immigrant parents, identify as fully French but carry complex identities. They navigate a France that celebrates equality in theory but often stumbles in practice. When discrimination surfaces, whether in hiring, policing, or housing, the frustration is immediate and visible. Protests and demonstrations are part of Parisian life, but in recent years, they've also become expressions of a deeper cry for dignity. Still, beneath the tension lies creativity. Paris's suburbs, especially Saint-Denis, have exploded with new art, music, and film scenes. The global success of French rap, Afro-trap, and street fashion comes directly from these neighborhoods. What once were dismissed as banlieues are now cultural engines, exporting trends across Europe. Immigrant influence is not a side story, it's the city's new pulse. Government policies have tried to keep pace. Billions have been invested in social housing, education, and police reform. Integration programs focus on language and employment, but progress is uneven. Politically, immigration remains a lightning rod issue. Presidential candidates debate border control and secularism while mayors on the ground deal with overcrowded schools and underfunded clinics. Yet despite heated rhetoric, most Parisians quietly coexist. Daily life is a mosaic of shared spaces and small compromises. A North African grocer chatting with an old French neighbor. A Romanian plumber fixing a cafe's pipes. A Malian nurse tending to patients in a public hospital. Tourism adds another layer. Visitors still come for the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre, often unaware that the workers who keep those landmarks pristine are the city's true backbone, men and women whose roots span continents. The City of Light glows because it draws energy from every corner of the globe. But Paris also faces an emotional divide. The center projects luxury, wealth, and heritage, the periphery, resilience and struggle. Urban planners call it the two Parises. The challenge isn't whether immigration is good or bad, it's whether prosperity can be shared across that invisible line. Projects like Grand Paris Express, the vast new metro expansion, aim to bridge that gap literally and symbolically. When finished, it will connect the poorest suburbs directly to the capital's heart, a steel promise that Paris still believes in unity. Culturally, the transformation is irreversible. Ramadan iftars spill into city squares. Afro-European designers headline Paris Fashion Week. Michelin star chefs fuse French gastronomy with North African flavors. The city that once exported culture now imports it, blends it, and sends it back out refined. It's not decline, it's evolution, though not everyone sees it that way. There are those who mourn a lost Paris, the café and beret image of postcards. And there are those who insist that the new, global Paris is more authentic than ever. Messy, alive, impossible to stereotype. Both are right, in their own ways. Paris has always reinvented itself, from revolution to reconstruction to globalization. Immigration is simply the latest chapter in a very old story. The city's relentless ability to absorb change and turn it into identity. That's why Paris stands at number 3 on our countdown. It's not just Europe's most visited city, it's the one that shows the world what modern Europe looks like when history, migration, and hope all collide. Paris hasn't lost itself, it has expanded to include everyone who dares to call it home. To Amsterdam, Netherlands. Few European cities wear modernity as naturally as Amsterdam. Sleek trams glide past 17th-century canals, cyclists outnumber cars, and art galleries sit beside startups. Yet in 2025, the Dutch capital has become one of Europe's most talked about examples of how migration can simultaneously power a city's growth and test its limits. Amsterdam isn't collapsing under diversity, it's learning, sometimes painfully, how to balance openness, identity, and sustainability. The Netherlands built its modern reputation on tolerance and trade. For centuries, it welcomed merchants, refugees, and innovators from abroad. But the 21st century brought new waves. Labor migrants from Eastern Europe, refugees from the Middle East and Africa, and knowledge workers drawn by Amsterdam's thriving tech economy. Today, roughly 40% of Amsterdam's population has a migration background, one of the highest proportions in Western Europe. That mix makes the city feel cosmopolitan beyond its size, but it also raises questions about space, housing, and belonging. Economically, immigration has been both blessing and burden. Migrants keep the city's logistics, healthcare, and service sectors running. Polish construction crews rebuild infrastructure. Turkish and Moroccan families dominate small business ownership. Indian and British tech workers fill the offices around the Zuida's financial district. But the very success of Amsterdam's global brand has created a paradox. The city has become too desirable for its own good. Housing is Amsterdam's breaking point. Apartments that rented for €1,000 in 2015 now exceed €2,500 in 2025. Many newcomers live in overcrowded flats or commute from distant suburbs. Even middle-class Dutch families are being priced out, leading to a rare unity of frustration among locals and immigrants alike. It's not about who lives here, one resident said in a recent local report. It's about who still can. This affordability crisis has transformed the city's social geography. Working-class districts like New West and Zuidoost, once dismissed by real estate agents, have become population powerhouses, home to large Moroccan, Surinamese, and Ghanaian communities. These neighborhoods, long stigmatized, now represent the true face of Amsterdam: multilingual, entrepreneurial, and youthful. Street markets in Bijlmer buzz with African music and Caribbean food stalls. Dutch, English, and Papiamento overlap in conversation. The city's cultural rhythm has shifted southward and eastward, toward its most diverse corners. Culturally, the transformation is unmistakable. The Dutch pride themselves on gezelligheid, a sense of warmth and togetherness, and immigrant communities have expanded that concept. Ramadan iftars spill into parks. Caribbean parades color the canals. Indonesian and Turkish cuisines dominate local delivery apps. The Rijksmuseum still celebrates Rembrandt, but contemporary galleries now showcase artists from Iran, Nigeria, and Syria. Amsterdam's globalism isn't abstract, it's visible on every street. Politically, the Netherlands continues to wrestle with immigration's complexity. The national debate often turns heated, about housing, asylum, and integration, but Amsterdam itself remains defiantly inclusive. The city council invests heavily in community programs and language support, insisting that diversity is an asset, not a liability. Still, tension exists between ideals and realities. Hate speech incidents and far-right rallies occasionally flare up, but they're met with equally vocal counter-movements defending multiculturalism. Education tells a hopeful story. Schools with high immigrant populations have improved dramatically, blending Dutch and international curricula. Second-generation youth, fluent in Dutch but rooted in multiple cultures, are redefining what it means to be Dutch. They dominate new media, fashion, and tech startups, merging global perspective with local creativity. Economists note that without this demographic renewal, Amsterdam's aging population would have left the city struggling to sustain growth. Social cohesion remains a work in progress. Surveys show that while 80% of residents value diversity, many worry about losing a sense of shared culture. Amsterdam's answer has been dialogue, not division. The city sponsors neighborhood events that bring communities together: block festivals, open mosque days, multicultural sports leagues. The idea is simple: when people share space, fear fades. Yet practical issues persist. Infrastructure strains under rapid growth. Public transport is crowded, and green spaces shrink as development expands. Tourists, still pouring in by the millions, compound the pressure. Immigration isn't the only cause of urban stress, but it magnifies it. City planners now describe Amsterdam's challenge as one of managing success. Despite it all, optimism endures. Amsterdam's economy remains one of Europe's strongest, driven by diversity itself. Migrant-owned businesses contribute billions annually. The same internationalism that complicates identity also drives innovation. Dutch pragmatism, that centuries-old knack for compromise, is still working. "We argue," said one city official, "but we don't break." In 2025, Amsterdam stands as a mirror of Europe's future: prosperous, multicultural, but perpetually negotiating its balance between openness and preservation. It's no longer the quiet postcard city of canals and tulips. It's a dynamic metropolis powered by every accent on Earth. Some mourn the loss of the old Amsterdam. Others see a stronger, more global version emerging in its place. The truth lies somewhere in between. That's why Amsterdam ranks at number 2 on our list, not for decline, but for transformation. The city hasn't been overwhelmed by immigration, it's been reshaped by it. The challenge ahead isn't whether Amsterdam can remain open, it's whether it can stay affordable, cohesive, and human while being the world's most global village. 1. Stockholm, Sweden. At number 1 stands Stockholm, the calm-faced capital that has quietly become one of Europe's most studied examples of rapid demographic change. Few cities balance beauty and tension quite like it. Glass towers rising beside medieval streets, ice-blue waters mirroring pastel facades, and beneath it all, a conversation about who Sweden is becoming. For decades, Sweden's openness was its pride. When other nations closed borders, Stockholm built welcome centers. Refugees from the Balkans, the Middle East, and Africa found safety here, joined by labor migrants from Eastern Europe and tech talent from Asia. By 2025, more than 1/3 of Stockholm's residents have foreign backgrounds. On paper, it's a triumph of humanitarianism. In practice, it's a masterclass in both the power and the pressure of diversity. The economic engine. Stockholm's economy thrives on migration. Its hospitals, construction sites, transit systems, and software firms all depend on workers born elsewhere. Startups in Kista and Södermalm attract engineers from India, Poland, and Iran. Restaurants that once served only meatballs and herring now offer Ethiopian injera, Syrian shawarma, and Korean fusion. Culinary tourism alone contributes millions annually. The city hums with languages, creativity, and global connectivity. But prosperity has a shadow. Housing shortages have reached record levels. Apartments that rented for 10,000 Swedish kronor a month now exceed 18,000. Waiting lists for public housing stretch years. Both native Swedes and newcomers feel squeezed, and frustration finds political outlets. Debates about immigration are no longer abstract, they're about rent, schools, and social services. The neighborhood divide. Nowhere is the contrast sharper than between central Stockholm and its outer districts. Gamla Stan still glows with postcard perfection, cafes bustle with tourists and bankers. But in suburbs like Rinkeby, Tensta, and Husby, the story changes. These neighborhoods, often labeled multicultural hubs by officials and segregated zones by critics, embody the complexities of integration. On a weekday morning, streets fill with Somali, Kurdish, and Arab shop owners opening businesses. Children speak Swedish in schoolyards but switch to Arabic or Somali at home. Community centers host language classes, coding boot camps, and basketball leagues. Life is vibrant, but opportunities are uneven. Youth unemployment in some suburbs is double the city average, and social workers warn that inequality, not culture, fuels alienation. Still, local initiatives offer hope. Grassroots organizations run mentorship programs linking professionals with immigrant teens. Municipal investment in small business grants has turned parts of Rinkeby's Main Street into a corridor of entrepreneurship. Swedish and migrant artists collaborate on murals that spell, "We are Stockholm. We are Stockholm," in 10 languages. The message? Inclusion isn't automatic, it's built daily. Politics and perception. Nationally, Sweden's once consensual politics have splintered. The immigration debate dominates elections. Parties call for stricter asylum laws, while others defend open values. Stockholm, though, remains largely progressive. Its residents value diversity even as they demand better management. Surveys show a nuanced picture. Most Stockholmers support humanitarian migration but worry about housing, schooling, and public safety. Crime statistics fuel the controversy. While overall crime has not skyrocketed, high-profile gang incidents in 2023 and 2024 shocked the public. Experts emphasize that socioeconomic inequality, not ethnicity, drives the problem, yet headlines often blur the nuance. The result is fear in some quarters and fatigue in others. Local police now combine enforcement with outreach, hiring bilingual officers and sponsoring youth sports. Community trust programs are slow, but they work. Culture and identity. If you want to understand how immigration reshaped Stockholm, walk through Södermalm on a Friday night. Jazz bars host Syrian violinists, design studios employ Chilean illustrators, Nigerian DJs mix Afro house with Swedish pop. Fashion labels founded by second-generation Swedes of Iranian or Somali descent headline international shows. The city's cultural scene, once minimalist and Nordic, now beats with global rhythm. Even holidays are hybrid. During Ramadan, mosques open their courtyards for iftar feasts shared by Swedish neighbors. On Midsummer's Day, families from Iraq or Eritrea join traditional flower crown dances. Church bells and the call to prayer echo within the same soundscape. Stockholm hasn't lost its identity, it has layered new ones on top. Education. The real integration front. Classrooms reveal both the challenge and the promise. Teachers juggle students from 24 backgrounds, some fluent in Swedish, others learning their first phrases. Government funding for language immersion and after-school tutoring has expanded dramatically. Results are slow but visible. Graduation rates in immigrant-dense schools have risen 15% since 2019. Those students, future doctors, coders, and architects, will define Sweden's next era. Technology meets diversity. Stockholm brands itself as the Silicon Valley of the North, and immigrants are crucial to that claim. Nearly 45% of tech startup founders in 2025 were either foreign-born or second-generation. Multilingual teams build apps for cross-cultural communication, online education, and global logistics. This isn't coincidence. It's the direct product of an open-door policy that turned diversity into innovation capital. The human side. Beyond statistics, there's emotion. Older Swedes sometimes feel their quiet city changing too fast. Newcomers feel invisible despite their contributions. Yet when winter snow covers the streets and families gather under soft yellow lights, differences fade. Stockholm remains safe, orderly, and stunning, a reminder that adaptation doesn't erase beauty, it expands it. In truth, Stockholm's story is Europe's story written in ice and glass. How to protect compassion while preserving cohesion. It's not finished, no modern city's story is, but it proves that with honest dialogue and shared purpose, transformation can be strength, not fracture. That's why Stockholm takes the #1 spot. It's not the city most overwhelmed by migration, it's the city most transformed by it, standing at the frontier of what the next European century will look like: colder winters, warmer hearts, and 1,000 languages carried on the same northern wind. As the countdown ends, one truth becomes clear: Europe is changing, and its cities are the mirrors. From Stockholm's quiet resilience to Berlin's restless creativity, from Rome's struggle between past and present to Paris's bold reinvention, migration hasn't destroyed Europe. It's remade it. Not through politics alone, but through people, millions of them, chasing safety, work, and belonging. Some see that change as a threat. Others, as evolution. But whichever side you stand on, the reality is undeniable. The Europe of 2025 doesn't look like the Europe of 1995. It sounds different. Smells different. Thinks different. And for better or worse, that difference is its new identity. If you walk through these cities, down the cobblestone lanes of Lisbon, the neon avenues of Berlin, or the frozen bridges of Stockholm, you'll find one thing in common: humanity. People starting over, raising children, running cafes, studying, arguing, dreaming. The headlines may focus on conflict, but the streets tell a softer story of coexistence, survival, and rebirth. History has always moved through migration. Empires rose because of it. Cultures flourished because of it. And the Europe of tomorrow will be no exception. The question is not whether change is coming, it's how we choose to shape it. So the next time you hear that a city has changed forever, remember this: cities have always changed. That's what keeps them alive. Which of these cities surprised you the most? Do you believe immigration strengthens or divides Europe's future? Let me know your thoughts below. I read every comment. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe and turn on notifications for more deep dives into how the world is changing, one city at a time. Until next time, travel smart, think globally, and remember, every map tells two stories: the one we see, and the one still being written.